Does it work? It did work. It did work for me. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So there it is. My name is Martin Wallé. I'm CEO of BrainCool, a medical device company from Lund that was started in 2014. We have developed two business units over the years, and today I will focus on the area of brain cooling, where we have two medical devices, the BrainCool system and the RhinoChill. And I will also take the opportunity to give our takeaway message from a clinical trial, the princess that was presented at American Heart the other weekend. However, this clinical trial will lead to up to 4 or 5 clinical scientific publications, which is not yet published. So I'm a little bit restrained of going into detail, but would surely provide you with good information. So, the effect of loss of blood supply to the brain in cardiac arrest and stroke have been heavily documented over the years. There's a number of famous cases where skiers have been fallen into cold lakes and taken to hospitals and ending up having full brain recovery after some weeks. That has led to a very interesting market of cooling down patients for sudden cardiac arrest and stroke patients, which is very, very big patient populations. The business unit of brain cooling comprises of two devices. We have a RhinoChill system, which you can cool down the patients from the scene of the cardiac arrest or stroke in some cases, in the street, in the ambulance, follow that through to the emergency room until the ICU, where we have a surface cooling system called the BrainCool system, a continuum of care setup. This treatment has been widely accepted in sudden cardiac arrest. And I would like to give an overview of the current guidelines of the American Heart Association, where there's a level of evidence, number one, that all patients have to be cooled in cardiac arrest in American hospitals today. And this is the current guidelines. There's 3 phases of hypothermia. It's the induction phase, going down to target temperature. There's a maintenance phase, keeping the patient controlled for 24 hours, sometimes 72 hours, and a rewarming phase, which should be controlled and well maintained. So, and in the guidelines, it said the cooling should be rapid, effective, it should be controlled, but it also clearly says time is a critical factor. You get a 20% increase of mortality for every hour of delay starting cooling. There's a 6% increase in the risk of poor outcome for every set of 5 minutes that the patient gets cooling later on. This is the current guidelines in America that all hospitals have to cool cardiac arrest patients. Then there are European guidelines, there are some national guidelines in Europe, there's Canadian guidelines, but most of them look at the American guidelines, which is roughly similar. But the American Heart Association is a very, very strong group that affects guidelines internationally. And today's availability of cooling of cardiac arrest patient today is only late state cooling. You start cooling at the ICU with products like the BrainCool system. That is what's offered today. The BrainCool solution of combining these two devices, we have the RhinoChill device, which you can start cooling in the Princess trial after average 90 minutes after cardiac arrest, cool the patients in the ambulance, cool the patients from the hospital emergency entry through the different tests up to the ICU, where we change to our product, the BrainCool system, which is an advanced computerized system for maintenance cooling, where we have experience of cooling patients up to 5-6 days. And this is our solution that we now are going to enter and make a serious market launch with. Here are some examples of the RhinoChill used. This is a photo of Freiburg, the Corsair Fiber. This is in their doctor cars, how they fit in the RhinoChill. It's been used in RhinoChill in Freiburg in 150 patients the last couple of years outside of clinical trial. This is a photo from Darmstadt, and I think this is with the BrainCool system at a hospital in Sweden. And I would like to take the opportunity to give a sort of example of a temperature curve. This is an ongoing on an SMS from a stroke professor in Germany. To give an example where they cool down a awake patient, stroke patient with the BrainCool system, where you can see the induction phase. So RhinoChill has not been used. Induction phase with the BrainCool system going into the maintenance phase. And here they're going to cool this patient for 39 hours. And he did send this photo after 19 hours. But this is an example how exact the BrainCool system do the maintenance phase. This is a very stable patient curve where we, from the BrainCool side, could really say now the evaluations of BrainCool system in Sweden and Germany really show examples how exact, precise the BrainCool system is, which is very, very important for the long-term launch. Det funkar inte då. The market and competition then for our two devices, the RhinoChill system and the BrainCool system. The RhinoChill, as I told before, there is no competition. There's no products available before the ICU. Okay. And this has now been assessed in a clinical trial, the Princess trial that was presented at American Heart. I will tell you some takeaways later. The BrainCool system is an advanced maintenance cooling. Our first product to market, CE-marked, and it's also FDA cleared. There is competition from Bard, which is bought by Becton Dickinson, from Alcius, which was bought by Sol, which was bought by a Japanese conglomerate, which has an endovascular solution using cold saline. Stryker has entered the market, GeneTerm has bought. So this is 4 of our main competition in America and Europe. All of these companies has been formed by acquisitions. And we have worked intensely in the development of BrainCool to bring a product to the market which has been heavily assessed in Germany and Sweden, looking at all the clinical evidence of this other product, saying, okay, we are now on the level or maybe more advanced in applying cooling for a number of different set of patients. The US market today we assess to 200 to 250 million US dollars per year. It's high growth in this market due to further implementation of cooling of cardiac arrest patients and a big implementation of cooling of neurological patients. So in America it's used also for a lot of fever management of neuro patients in stroke and TBI. So we think our aim is to be a leader in cardiac arrest, but also help to enable a bigger increase of the use in the market of neurology. We have a number of patents, intellectual product portfolio. I will not go into detail, but both the BrainCool system, the RhinoChill has a number of approved patents from China to America. So very strong patent protection for our products. We also have a number of patents approved for our oncology and migraine applications that's included in this. I would like to give a sort of a little overview before going into the Princess trial about clinical trials in hypothermia. Already Socrates and Napoleon in the Russian war used hypothermia on military patients that has been damaged in war, having them in snow to try to help brain recovery. What really started the implementation in hospital is 2 clinical trials, one in Australia, Bernard trial, and one run out of Finland, a multi-center European trial, looking at cardiac arrest survival compared to a control group of no treatment of VF patients. I will come back to that. So this is the basis for implementation of cardiac arrest. That took until 2010 to really get that accepted and get into the European guidelines. And in these guidelines, they also recommend pre-hospital cooling, where they use cold saline. And then comes 2 clinical trials in 2013, TTM1 and the KIM study. The KIM study assessed pre-hospital cooling and hospital cooling using cold saline. And the outcome of that trial is that it was dangerous for patients to use cold saline. So this led to that pre-hospital coolings were taken out of the guidelines. First, they took away pre-hospital cooling, everything, and then they understood, okay, we take out pre-hospital cooling using cold saline because it's dangerous for patients. But currently, there are no other options. The Tdm trial is an interesting trial led from Lund University, where they cool cardiac arrest patients, one arm 33 degrees and the other arm 36 degrees. That clinical trial came to the conclusion that there was no difference in survival. A big criticism to this clinical trial is that these patients were started cooling 5-6 hours after the cardiac arrest. Remember the Princess trial, it was 90 minutes. 5-6 hours in a patient groups where you can have a mortality of up to 90%. So this trial has been heavily criticized, even though it's an interesting trial, that you could get equally good results only cooling down to 36 degrees. Personally, I think that's wrong, and this has actually led to a second clinical trial, because this has been so heavily criticized on different markets. But bear in mind, also cooling down to 36 could lead to good results, and it's actually even more complicated than cool down the patients to 33 degrees, because when you come around 35, 36 degrees, your body starts shivering, which is often a sort of a hurdle for these cooling products to be implemented. Then we've been involved in a big clinical trial which was funded by the European Union called the EuroHIP, where the European Union invested with leading stroke researchers of trying to make a clinical trial cooling down patients to 34 degrees compared to a placebo control group. This clinical trial succeeded only in recruiting 100 patients. It was a very complex pharmaceutical clinical trial that they tried to implement in 28 countries. So it hasn't led to any meaningful results because the number of patients were too small. However, for BrainCool, this has been a very good experience, because our aim with the BrainCool system is to be the best of cooling awake patients. And that has led to a number of customers. We are working with the biggest stroke center in Germany today and cooling stroke patients, like I just gave you an example of. The Princess trial, then, I will give you a little bit takeaway message from, was a big clinical trial led by Karolinska that had just been presented in American Heart of 700 sudden cardiac arrest patients that would start cooling already after 90 minutes. This has led to a new clinical trial called the Tdm, where they compare cooling to 33, comparing to a control group where you just control the fever around 37. Where BrainCool is participating in a sub-study. It's a hospital trial where we start with Rhinochill from the emergency room and then change to the BrainCool system at the ICU. So, the key takeaway from the Princess study. So the Princess trial is a multi-center clinical trial that's been led by the Karolinska Institute in 7 different European countries. This will lead to a number of scientific publications, which is not official yet. So this is the BrainCool takeaway message of what's available on the internet today. Earlier cooling with the Rhinochill will go into guidelines, because this trial clearly showed that this was safe and feasible. Remember now the guidelines from American Heart. All hospitals have to cool cardiac arrest patients, and you should cool them as quickly as possible. This is the only solution that has been proven to be safe and feasible to implement to cool as quickly as possible. There was also a statistically significant improvement which resulted in better neurological intact patients with CPC1, meaning that the patients that was cooled within 13 minutes, which is very, very quickly, you had 70% ending up in full brain recovery. then there is 5 different categories where number 1 is very, very unusual. You get your cardiac arrest, you get your hypothermia treatment, and you will go to work in 1 week's time. Already in CPC2, you will be affected. You will be affected. Conscious, sufficient cerebral function with independent activities of daily life, able to work in a sheltered environment. When? After a period of rehabilitation. So obviously there will be a huge health economic output of this trial. And if this set of patients, for example, could be translated into other areas such as stroke, if we can find a subset of patients in stroke, where every stroke patient in Sweden costs nearly 1 million Swedish crowns. Of course, there's a huge potential of implementing the RhinoChill close to the CPR as quickly as possible. So I also told you that the RhinoChill is safe. This study shows we don't have to discuss the outcomes. You can say it's safe and feasible to use this product. Bear in mind the American guidelines. You should cool patients, every patient in America, as quickly as possible. And that's the same, for example, in Germany. There you can also say that RhinoChill cools the brain with a method in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. It actually could shorten the time to target. It's important to cool the patient as quickly as possible, but it's important to reach the target temperature as quickly as possible, like the example that I showed with the BrainCool system. So the idea is, in the ambulance, when they do the CPR, you should cool as quickly as possible in conjunction with the RhinoChill. Then you might ending up having this opportunity. This trial didn't show statistical significance, however, in the primary outcome of survival of the patients. Bear in mind, it's not for me to argue, but the clinical trial document, the clinical trial protocol was written in 2009. There's a huge knowledge of hypothermia that has come up to now. So maybe they were unrealistic to argue that we're going to improve survival of 22% in a subset of 700 patients. In a cardiac arrest trial in the pharmaceutical community, where of course they have much more money and can do clinical trials in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 patients, it's judged to be a huge advantage if you can reach improved survival of 2-3%. So maybe it was not realistic, maybe not, it's not for me to say. But I would say the takeaway from the PRINCESS study that we've seen so far, and I think this will be heavily supported in the coming scientific publication, is very, very interesting. BrainCool as a company has presented part of this together with the researchers. For the chairman of the American Resuscitation Meeting, we met the chairman of the American Heart Organization, and we are in work to present this for leading key opinion leaders in Germany, Holland, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, right now as it is. So, the trick, of course, long term, combine the 2 products, the RhinoChill and the BrainCool system. That will bring us the best market. So the targets of BrainCool today, bear in mind, hypothermia products up to now is approved as medical devices for general hypothermia, not for indications. So, the target for sudden cardiac arrest, you probably understand that the combination of these 2 products is now going to be launched, and our goal is to finally start to launch a combination of 2 unique devices to take on and building sales. We still think that stroke is a very interesting field. The outcome of the Europe trial wasn't as positive as the European hoped for, because all these stroke centers hasn't been able to implement this hugely complex protocol. The experience for BrainCool has been good. We've been better in cooling awake patients. We received EU funding of 1.2 million euro for a brain save project where we work with the leading stroke center in Finland and in Darmstadt, one of the biggest stroke hospitals in Germany, to further implement and improve this technology. We also have started a project of combining the RhinoChill and the BrainCool system for a subset of stroke patients called thrombectomy. I'll tell you a little bit more of that. In the US, there's a large growth in demand of cooling neurological patients with fever. So avoid that the patient get fever. There's a huge economic benefit in that. And that's more of cooling a patient to 36, 37, and if they get a fever, getting them down to 37. And that might sound simple, but that also demands a lot of complexity, and it also requires a lot of faith in the device, because you could cool these patients up to 10 days. And we are the only device in America that's approved for cooling patients more than 5 days. We're the only device. There's no cap, because there is trust in the BrainCool ecosystem, as they call it in the USA, that we actually could cool patients more than 5 days. Okay, there will be a new segment here. VF patients should be cooled as quickly as possible. There's no reason in the world why this shouldn't lead to implementing RhinoShield in the ambulance. I'm now going to give you an example of the most successful medical device implemented in the hospitals the last recent years. There's one device called Lucas. It's actually from Lund. It was developed by a Swedish company that was acquired by Physio Control. That's now approved by Stryker. And they have a competition from Autopulse, which is a device from Sol, who is also a competitor of BrainCool in the hypothermia segment. Their best clinical trial shows that this may be as positive as doing chest compression manually. That is the basis. In the case of Autopulse, it even says in this clinical trial, the only randomized controlled clinical trial, yeah, but it's a little bit dangerous. It's actually much more dangerous than do this manual. This is the clinical evidence for implementing in thousands of patients. Compare that to the Princess trial, where there's a statistically significance in the VF patients that 70% of these patients, if you cool them within 13 minutes, will have almost complete brain recovery. There's a huge potential in that, both for the patient, for the society, and most of all, for the shareholders, health economics. What is the value of getting that number of patients to have full brain recovery? That is something that I hope this clinical trial publications will give you more information. I think I've said enough about sudden cardiac arrest. Health economic benefit, CPC 1, 2, and why not bringing all the patients for CPC 2, which is good, to CPC 1. Neurogenic fever. Fever is shown to be related to extended hospital stays in neurologically injured patients. This is from an American clinical trial. This is also in guidelines in America in neurology. So this is a fact, and there's a growth in demand where we have made financial calculations that you can save up to $17,000 to implement brain cooling with the BrainCool system in this set of patients. Stroke, I told you about the EuroHip experience. We are dedicated to continue to work. We work with the biggest stroke center in Germany, assessing the BrainCool system very successfully, cooling away patients today. We have strong support by the EU. All our further development is paid by EU funds. And we define the sector thrombectomy patients, where you're mechanically removing the blood clot from the blood vessel. That has shown improved survival, and it's a huge success in the treatment of stroke. Here we will cool patients together with thrombectomy, because these patients are sedated, so we can implement the RhinoShield directly. And our aim was to either further improve the survival of this patient, which is a huge success, or why not? Why not say, okay, let's say survival is equal, but if we can translate the Princess result, saying if you cool the patient before reperfusion after 15 minutes, already in the ambulance, and could have potentially a 70% full recovery of a stroke patient, that cost the Swedish society, every stroke cost the Swedish society 1 million Swedish crown. If we would benefit 5% of that, 50,000, our medical device to be implemented in the ambulance, could be fairly interesting. We have run patients with the RhinoShield, the BrainCool system, in thrombectomy already. Hope that will lead to interesting scientific publications. And we would run a 30 or 50 patient trial the first quarter of 2019 with a cost of 10,000 euros with Darmstadt and University of Freiburg in Germany. We think this could be a very interesting area. And here we have an example of, here we implement the RhinoShield already in the ambulance. We work on the technical integration that it should be as smooth as possible to change the BrainCool system. That lacks a little bit today, not with the BrainCool system, but when you try to implement pre-hospital cooling, it hasn't been a good fit into the cooling in ICU. And when you stop cooling, there's a risk of rewarming the patient, which could be very negative. We work with development of a temperature sensor to measure the temperature in the brain, which also is funded by the European Union, which hopefully will be a separate product add-on to this. By all means, it's been complicated implementing BrainCool system in the stroke area cooling of awake patients, but we are very, very positive that we received funding from the European Union, and we think we will be able to raise even more non-dilutive funding for these projects. So brain cooling today, where are we? We have 2 CE mark devices. The BrainCool system is already FDA cleared. Everyone in the room understands, okay, the Princess trial, everybody waited for it. So of course, on the assembly line is to present the Princess trial when there come a number of publications for the US FDA to see or share if they have the same attitude as us. We completed clinical trials, product evaluation, solid results also for the BrainCool system. We are currently conducting cost reduction programs for our devices to Asian players in Taiwan, Vietnam, in Poland. We have a number of reference customers, Sweden and Germany, and we have a route to market strategy defined. So how on earth should BrainCool now take this to be a commercial success? We're going to build sales in German sales, where we will set up a direct sales operation. I will tell you about the management right now. We have a US organization of 3 employees that soon will be 5, with very experienced management, and we're going to build partner sales, a sales network based on that we make a success in Germany and the US. If you make it in Germany, you make it in the rest of the EU, with or without Angela Merkel. If you make it in the US, yeah, with Trump, that's good enough. But if you make it in both, you're in a very good position to build a partner network. We're changing the organization. We have a very experienced global sales and marketing head called Brian Nicholson. He built the business of Arctic Sun, our main competitor in the US. We hired their chief nurse, who conducted all the training for Arctic Sun in the US. We hired a 3rd person, a very good young sales guy that sold a number of Arctic Sun devices. They take the work in BrainCool for one reason: we got good product. We changed his role now. He should focus only on the major market, the US market. Europe will be held by Elmar Landwehr. He built all the business for the company Sol between 2010 and 12 for another of our biggest competitor. We have 3 persons, 2 working on commission, working very hard now in Germany. And we will continue. Our previous sales director, Christian Strand, a very important person in the company, will then focus supporting this too, of course, as a product manager, but also to build distribution sales. So in the US right now, we have 1 product approved, the iCool system, 2019. Full focus, sales implementation of the iCool. We have a number of evaluations going with the iCool in the US, a few of them in a big healthcare system, where the potential in one healthcare system could be bigger than the whole market of Sweden. Germany focus on 2 things, BrainCool system and the RhinoShield. We should first get RhinoShield into ambulances in Germany. There's a high belief in hypothermia. We have a number of reference customers for the RhinoShield, even outside of the Princess trial. Partner sales will be BrainCool, RhinoShield, and Coral system, which is a very interesting oncology device. We already got orders, we got fast track from the USA, and we have a number of interesting clinical trials. Maybe I have time to give a short pitch in the interview afterwards. But these 2 operations, we should focus only on BrainCool and deliver business for us in 2019. So summary, unique products, good patent protection, Every product is a cash flow product. Every treatment is a device, and then it's scrapped. So it's a very good model. We established experienced sales operation. Okay, BrainCool's been up for 4 years. We've done an excellent job, to be honest. You can look at the other medical device companies that don't even get to see marking. We're talking about a huge effort to bring all these products to market. But let's say, maybe we're not the right one to really build the sales. I finally recruited the one that built BART sales in America. In Germany, who built the most business there, Elmar Landwehr, they're working from BrainCool. We are finding the right management to take this company to the next step. Princess will result in a huge step forward for implementation of hypothermia throughout the world. For shareholders, you did note all my competitors, big medical device companies, they've been bought 1, 2, 3, 4 times. There's hypothermia device companies in the US that could raise $15 million US, and they're still in animal studies 10 years from where BrainCool is today. The ambulance, of course, it's difficult to get products into ambulance. Bear in mind, there was cooling, pre-hospital cooling, that then was prohibited. So now there is no cooling. Now that has to be restarted. It's not an easy task, I have to admit. Pre-hospital cooling, different budgets than the hospital market, often less money, and often very fragmented, even in Germany, even in America, even in Pennsylvania. But why should Lucas' device be such a success? Hey, and not Rhinochill. At least we got evidence. Oncology, potential, first mover, will be for another presentation. That's it.
Thank you, Martin. Speaking in overdrive as usual. It's great.
I tried to be calm this time.
Yeah, no, it's you have a lot to say. That's cool. So obviously, I'm aware you can't really discuss details of the Princess study. Perhaps I'm understanding that it's because of the upcoming publications that will be published in scientific magazines and so. But given the fact that the primary endpoint was not met, but then there was secondary endpoints that were positive, will it be the tipping point for kind of changing the general view on medical cooling?
I would say yes. Read the American guidelines. Every hospital should cool cardiac arrest patients in America, and you should cool them as quickly as possible. Here you got a method that's safe and feasible. You're comparing in this clinical trial not to a control group. That is nothing. You're comparing to the golden standard. Okay? You're comparing to patients where this worked. It's difficult to show improved survival. And one can question, how on earth could they think they could improve survival of 22%? But that was not unrealistic to think based on the feasibility studies done in 2010. But at that point, the implementation of cooling in the control group, so to say, it was much inferior to what it is today. Then, of course, the Princess trial over the years have had some difficulties because BrainCool came into the middle and bought the device, and the American companies didn't really focus. So, of course, there's been big recruitment, then lower, and then BrainCool pushed this up to a higher scale. So, but I would say the short answer to the question is yes, this will definitely change the implementation, and we're going to prove it.
So you would then say that you have, clinical evidence, and you have a top-notch sales force in place in the US, in Germany.
Still small, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah. So when will we see the big impact on BrainCool's sales?
We understand what's at stake. I mean, there's a budget that's going to be set right now. BrainCool has to build serious sales in Germany, in the US, 2019. We'll build some sales with distributors, but the most important strategically is home markets. And now we just define Germany as our home market for a number of reasons. The market is bigger. And we have already a lot of customers, and we work in our other projects already with the biggest stroke center in Germany. So 2019, we take the first steps. Then in a couple of years, we will have sales exceeding bone support. That you just said.
Okay. Emil might have to take you up on that challenge.
Bone support sales today, not where they will sell in 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So, final question. We are running out of time here. You mentioned that you had discussions then with some key players after the Princess trial was presented. What can you tell us about the general uptake of the results?
One should say this is a very interesting clinical trial that was presented at 2 different meetings at the same time. The big American heart, which include everything. And then it was presented at the lunch session at the resuscitation meeting, which is really what this product is about, resuscitation, sort of a specialized subgroup. And of course, a presentation at American Heart has a scientifically focus of presenting the primary outcome. Okay, what was the primary outcome of this trial? And it should be presented as it did not meet statistical significant results, even though the survival was 10% higher. Maybe that could have been a realistic target with more patients. But I would say from the outcome of the people that work with these devices of the resuscitation meeting, there were standing ovations. I mean, I'm just saying how it is. This is a very difficult trial to implement. They succeeded in cooling patients within 90 minutes. The standard of care is 5-6 hours. And I would like to quote the first, there was a question session that was going on for 20 minutes after this, and they had to stop it because people, and the first German doctor, a professor from, I think it was Heidelberg, said, "Oh God, if I get in cardiac arrest, could somebody help to cool me quickly?" That is what the doctors think in the street. But the most financial interesting question for a shareholder of BrainCool is, okay, will this trial lead to, like many other companies, to yet another trial? And that question is no. We will take the prince, the princess, combine these results, start pushing this to the market. We will not invest in further pre-hospital clinical trials in Europe. If the NIH would come and say we want to do a big trial in America, of course we would say yes. But BrainCool's money will not go to further clinical trials with RheinShield.
Okay. I think we'll end it there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.